What happens when fear isn't just felt, but inherited? When the voice inside your head isn't yours alone, and the spirit of this isn't outside, but already living in you? What if a story isn't just happenstance, but a sacred text unfolding? What if every shadow, every column, every image belongs to a spiritual legacy that refuses to die? What if your experience becomes an echo that carries you forward? What, in that moment, a line, a breath, what you hear isn't just lip service, but your introduction to something bigger? Find out the answer to these questions next, here on Free Your Mind. Hit it. All right, so the last thing we read were about the whispers being back with Ariana, and she thinks it's the prophecy. So now we move on to Everett. So meanwhile, Everett had snuck around the western entrance of the palace. He was kneeled down, hiding behind one of the 6 Dragonforce statues of the first that decorated the exterior of the castle. He quickly peeked around at the face of the one keeping him hidden. Ravel. I wonder, is he still alive? He thought, noticing the name displayed on the backside placard of its base. He shrugged it off, more concerned about meeting his idols. Everett waited patiently, looking for his chance to infiltrate. He could barely contain his excitement. Suddenly, the gates opened, and a slew of soldiers came out marching, taking their position single file against the castle wall. Oh, finally! I'll just wait until they all go up front, and I'll have my chance. Everett clenched his fists with excitement. The gate guards were distracted by their peers. Quickly, he ran in the entrance behind the last soldier that came out. He walked through the castle interior, straight down the corridor. The boy was in awe at the high-arched ceilings that met at a point at the top. Some full and partial walls around the archway were sculpted, while others were covered in paintings. He knew not of the stories that were being told, but these carvings, sculptures, and paintings were marvelous. He began to get caught up in all of the imagery. Before he knew it, he had made it to the main hall. The stairs were right there, but the images, they were pulling him in. He continued past them, walking along as if being summoned. Everett was completely entranced by everything. All that he witnessed seemed so alive. He could almost hear them talking to him. Everett didn't realize that he had come to the end. The whispers had become louder than ever before. There were so many voices talking to him at once before they just stopped. An unexplained force had grabbed his attention, pulling his gaze to the wall in front of him. There upon it was this mural of a man holding a massive sword. He was ginger-haired and garbed in all white. Everett felt a familiarity as though they had met before. Suddenly, within the mural, the image of the man in white began to hover. No longer a stagnant portrait, he had come alive. Responsively, a rush of images flashed into his memory. Everett stumbled back, overwhelmed and unable to breathe from the shock. His silky ginger hair defied gravity and became white, staying afloat above his shoulder as if he were underwater, poised in the middle of a lake. The man had morphed from one visual image to another, dressed in little more than an armored skirt. The symbol upon his bare chest revealed his true identity. The Dragon King slowly turned. Firstly, this god of gods looked across the painted field before him. Back around he turned, just as slowly, the painting around him morphing as he did. As the Dragon King looked down, a sea of fallen creatures appeared scattered at his bejeweled bare feet. Everett inhaled deeply, his body trembling in response to what he was witnessing. He felt ever present, as if he were perceiving himself existing in this painted reality. The boy could even feel the movement of the air around him. He even smelled how putrid the air was with the mixture of smoke and death. Everything he witnessed felt real to him. The movement of a new shadow triggered him to look upward. A giant white beast now circled above the Dragon King. Everett tried to scream, fearful at the sight of this wingless snake. He fell back on his butt, scooting away in fear as it began to move closer. The beast eyed the boy, eventually coiling itself around the floating man. It was his companion, the white dragon. Jag bor I degna min son. The Dragon King finally spoke at him, noticing he was there. The figure stared at him intently with his pearl-white pupil eyes. His gaze bored deep as if he awaited a response to his words. The beast roared at him, seemingly urging him to respond. It bared its sharp teeth as if he was about to eat him. Everett managed to gasp, tasting the tang of horror in the air. Then, abruptly, he was thrown back into his own reality. He fell to his knees, breathing heavily. Everett was dripping sweat as his mind raced, shaken from the experience. He looked behind him, hearing more voices. He wasn't sure if they were real or in his mind. Everett managed to hop up and hide behind one of the pillars just in case, leaving a trail of sweat droplets. As the voices got closer, he watched in shadow as two random ladies walked by. They were completely oblivious to his presence. Everett shivered, trembling as he moved from pillar to pillar. He tried his best to stay hidden from who he assumed were the staff as he escaped. He looked back toward where he was, noticing his sweat trail was more prominent than he felt one would be. Partial bare footprints could be seen in his sweaty path. His eyes widened fearfully, knowing something ghostly was following him. I got to find those steps and head to the balcony. Everett tried to calm his ragged breathing. He peeked his head out to look around. He did a double take, the eyes of the man in the mural and his meeting. Though off in the distance, he could still feel the Dragon King. He winced, feeling that connective pull again. Everett ducked back around, unable to get the image of this man or that beast out of his head. The whispers were now back, beginning low at first, then instantly overwhelming him again. Everett jumped, startled by the sound of the floating man's voice speaking more clearly to him. I live in you now, my son. All right, folks, that's the end of this reading. I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard and you've fallen deeper into the story. But now it is time for the author's corner. Cue the music. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the author's corner. We have just finished a small piece of the book with so much in it, in my personal opinion. Those questions that I asked you in the beginning before the reading started, let's review those and see if we have a couple answers for you here. Let's see if my answers match up with yours. All right, question number 1. What happens when fear isn't just felt but inherited? When the voice inside your head isn't yours alone, and the spirit of this isn't outside but already living in you? Good question, right? All right, so I would say that Everett's fear isn't inherited at all, but it's more than a reaction, possibly part of his identity. The Dragon King's voice isn't an external threat per se. It's more like a spiritual hug. His legacy speaking through blood and breath. That line, I live in you now, my son. It isn't a metaphor. It's a declaration of lineage, of mythic inheritance. Everett's unraveling isn't just psychological, it's ancestral. His fear isn't a realization of anything that he's aware of, but more subconsciously. So, yes, subconsciously, he knows, or he feels, or has a knowing or a feeling that the spirit lives in him, or maybe even always has, right? All right, next question. What if a story isn't just happenstance, but a sacred text unfolding? What if every shadow, every column, every image belongs to a spiritual legacy that refuses to die? Refuses is a strong thing. I think it's more like what's the word? Not refuses, but yeah, I guess refuses to die. Well, this isn't a story per se, but more a layout as you would see a scripture, as a narrative, I would say. Every architectural detail that I explained, every shadow, every breath held in silence, it's part of that mythical choreography that I'm building toward a crescendo of, right? Yes, these are just characters, but maybe the Dragon King isn't just a character in this story. He's more like the legacy of the story, he's encoded in every structure, every bit of essence of Everett, I would say, or at least Everett's world. I try to make it so the pages read kind of like a ritual, deliberate pacing, just based on his surrounding feel, taste, touch, all that. So I wrote it with a certain cadence, a certain score, because I wanted you to feel what he felt or what he feels in every step. I want you to see how Everett is both the reader like you, kind of reading into the situation, and in the end, the sacrifice that he didn't know he was going to be. All right, so the third and final question, what if your experience becomes an echo that carries you forward? Right? So that's what the first question was. So really what it's saying is, what if Everett's experience becomes an echo that carries him forward now that we've gone through the reading, right? What in that moment, a line, a breath, what Everett hears isn't just lip service, but his introduction to something bigger. Well, I would say Everett he definitely experienced something bigger. More than bigger. I would say he wasn't even ready for what came. Right? His experience was more than trauma, though. It was initiation. That moment, a line, a breath, isn't just lip service. Yeah, that written line that I just said for myself about him in that question, right? It reverberates through Everett's choices. You see it in his body language. You contemplate it possibly being part of his future. The experience becomes mythic in a way, like he's tethered to that spiritual experience with the Dragon King, and maybe that is what he ends up carrying forward. Because even after that fear is still there. He feels like he's being followed. That there's things, in every step with the sweat and the footprints and all that good stuff, right? So he's not just reacting to everything, unbeknownst to him, he's being rewritten. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you have answers to these questions for yourself? Do you believe that these answers that I've given you to these questions are true answers? Do you have better ones? Well, this is the part where I need you to like and subscribe if you have not, and leave a comment or comments based on what we just read and what you think I meant with every question and what my responses were, and if you feel they match up to what you felt and what you see. All right, folks, well, that's going to be it here today on the Author's Corner. I will see you next time. Until then.